At 2:17 on a Tuesday morning in November, the intrusion detection system at Holt Infrastructure Partners flagged an anomalous lateral movement pattern across 17 nodes on the company's internal network. The pattern was specific, a credential harvesting sequence that had entered through a legacy authentication module in the company's east segment and was probing the boundary between the internal network and the operational technology layer, the layer that connected Holt's digital infrastructure to the physical systems it managed for 11 municipal utility clients across southeastern Michigan. If the probe reached the OT layer, the attacker would have read access to the operational controls for water treatment, electrical distribution, and emergency services dispatch systems, serving a combined population of 340,000 people. The company's security operations center was staffed overnight. The analyst on duty escalated at 2:21. By 2:40, Vivienne Holt's head of security engineering had been woken up, had logged in remotely, and had spent 19 minutes looking at the attack vector and not understanding where it had come from. The legacy authentication module was the problem. It had been in the network for 9 years. The current security team had inherited it as a component they did not fully understand, had flagged it twice in the previous 18 months as a technical debt item requiring review, and had not reviewed it because the review required documentation that did not exist in any accessible system. The module had been written by Daniel Crane. Daniel Crane was 41 years old, a single father, and at 2:17 on that Tuesday morning he was asleep in a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood. His daughter Neve was asleep in the next room. His work bag, a canvas messenger bag with a courier company's logo on the strap, was by the front door. His shift started at 7. He had written the authentication module in 2016. He had also written the documentation for it, a 40-page technical specification that explained every design decision, every edge case, every dependency, and the 2 specific conditions under which the module would produce a vulnerability if the surrounding network architecture changed in specific ways. The documentation was not in the Holt infrastructure network. It was on a USB drive with a yellow tape label that said DC, Do Not Format, which was in the inner pocket of the canvas messenger bag by the front door. He had been the company's chief security architect for 9 years. He had been a courier for 8 months. Stay with this, because the man who was going to be delivering the building's mail in 4 hours and 43 minutes was the only person on Earth who could tell Vivienne Holt's security team exactly what was wrong with her network and exactly how to stop it. Daniel Crane lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Michigan Avenue in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood in a building that had been a commercial space and had been converted to residential with the specific thoughtfulness of a developer who had understood that the people moving into these units would have opinions about their environment. The ceilings were 12 feet, the windows were large. The main room had, in the year Daniel had lived there, accumulated the specific evidence of a man and a child who each had their own projects. Daniel's technical reference books along the south wall, Neve's drawings on the east wall, a shared kitchen table that was sometimes books, and sometimes drawings, and sometimes on Sunday mornings, both at once. Neve was 8 years old. She had her father's curiosity and her own particular mode of expressing it. She asked questions about everything, but not randomly. She asked questions in sequences, each one following from the answer to the previous one, in a way that produced, after 4 or 5 exchanges, a genuinely comprehensive understanding of whatever topic she had started with. She had a bright questioning look that arrived before the question itself, a half-second of visible preparation that her teachers found charming and her father found, correctly, the best part of her. She had light golden hair that she wore in 2 loose braids, gray eyes, and a gap between her front teeth that appeared when she smiled at something she found completely accurate. She was interested in what things were for, not just what things did, what they were for. She had asked at 6 what the fire hydrant was for, and Daniel had explained, and she had asked what the pipe connected to it was for, and Daniel had explained, and she had asked what controlled the water in the pipe, and Daniel had found himself, 45 minutes later, having given a 9-year-old a complete introduction to municipal water distribution infrastructure. The following morning she had come to breakfast with a drawing of the water system under their block, which was approximately correct. Daniel had told her that information moved differently. He had told her that he used to work on how information moved, not the packages, but the data, the signals, the protocols that made sure information got where it was supposed to go without being intercepted or altered. She had asked what intercepted meant. He had explained. She had thought about this for a long moment, and then said, so someone could take the information before it got there. He had said yes. She had asked how you stopped that. He had said that was what he used to do. Used to. The USB drive was a habit from a professional life he had been trying to figure out how to re-enter. He was a man who thought carefully and moved when the direction was clear. The direction had not been clear for 8 months. He was waiting for it to become clear. And in the meantime, he was delivering mail and packages for a courier company that had a contract with the building on West Grand River where Holt Infrastructure Partners occupied the 4th and 5th floors, which was not a coincidence. He had taken the courier contract specifically because it included the Holt building. Not to spy, not to gather intelligence. To be present in a building he had spent 9 years making secure. He had noticed 3 things in 8 months that he had written down in a separate notebook, specific observations about the building's physical security posture, cable management, and the 2 occasions on which he had overheard conversations in the elevator that suggested the security team was carrying unresolved technical debt in the east segment. He had not done anything with these observations. He was waiting for the direction to become clear. It became clear at 2:17 on a Tuesday morning in November when his phone rang. The number belonged to Marcus Osei, who had been Daniel's deputy security architect for 4 years and who had left Holt Infrastructure 6 months before Daniel. He had a contact in the Holt OSO. He had called him in a panic because the attack vector involved a module Marcus had worked on during Daniel's tenure, and Marcus had told his contact, honestly, that he didn't fully understand it, and that the only person who did was the man who had built it from scratch. Daniel, Marcus said when he answered. I know, Daniel said. The East Segment Auth module, Marcus said. Yes, Daniel said. Lateral movement through the legacy credential sequence. They're headed for the OT boundary. Can it be stopped? Daniel looked at his laptop. The monitoring service was showing the probe at the 14th of 17 nodes. Yes, he said, but not with what's in any accessible documentation, because the documentation is not accessible. Where is it? Daniel looked at the messenger bag by the door. With me, he said. They need more than the documentation, Daniel said. The module has a specific kill sequence for this exact attack vector. I designed it when I built the East segment in 2016 because this class of lateral movement attack was a predicted threat for OT-adjacent networks. The kill sequence is in the documentation, but someone who understands the architecture needs to execute it, or they'll isolate the wrong nodes and leave the OT boundary exposed. You need to call Vivienne, Marcus said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He thought about the restructuring meeting in March, 8 months ago. She won't know who I am, he said. She'll know in about 4 minutes, Marcus said. He looked at the messenger bag. He got up, went to the bag, unzipped the inner pocket, and took out the USB drive with the yellow tape label. He sat back at the laptop. In the next room, Neve made a sound in her sleep, the specific small sound of a child shifting position without waking. Daniel listened until it stopped. Then he opened the call. The call lasted 3 hours and 11 minutes. It began with Daniel locating the relevant section of the documentation on the USB drive and sharing his screen with Patrick Shine's team, the documentation, 40 pages, structured in the specific format of an enterprise security architecture document, with version history, dependency maps, and the kill sequence written out as a step-by-step operational procedure with clear decision points, was not what Patrick had expected. Patrick had expected notes, perhaps a diagram. What he got was a complete technical specification for a system his team had been managing for 3 years without understanding. The kill sequence required 11 steps. The first 3 steps isolated the compromised nodes without triggering the authentication module's failsafe, which would, if triggered, lock all credentials in the East segment and require a manual reset that would take 4 to 6 hours. The critical insight was in step 4. The module had been designed with a secondary credential pathway that could be activated from a specific administrative console that was, technically, still accessible if you knew it was there, and had the activation key. The activation key was in the documentation. Patrick read it. He looked at it. He said, "This console. It's not in any of our current documentation." "No," Daniel said. "It wouldn't be. It was built into the module in 2016 as a break-glass procedure for exactly this scenario. Then the console is there, Daniel said. It's been there for 9 years. Your team just hasn't known to look for it. Patrick located the console. He and his team executed the kill sequence, Daniel walking them through each of the 11 steps, confirming each one before they moved to the next, because this was not a procedure that tolerated deviation, and because the people executing it had never done it before, and because 340,000 people's utility infrastructure was on the other side of a boundary that was currently being probed by a threat actor who was moving faster than expected. At 4:51 a.m., the probe was stopped. The OT boundary held. "Thank you," Patrick said. "You're welcome," Daniel said. A pause. "Mr. Crane," Patrick said, "I need to brief Vivienne on this in the morning. I want her to understand the full picture. Would you be available for that call?" Daniel looked at the clock. 6:02. His shift started at 7. "I can be available at 8:30, he said. "I need to get my daughter to school first." He got Neve to school at 7:45. That morning, Neve had asked about the traffic control box on the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. She was now asking about it differently. Not what is it, or what connects to it. And Daniel had explained the signal timing network, and she had asked if it could be turned off from somewhere else, and Daniel had said yes, and she had been quiet for a block, and then said, "That's what you protect," that kind of thing. He had said yes. She had nodded once, with the specific nod of someone adding information to a framework that is becoming more complete. "You should be doing that again," she said. He did not say anything. She looked at him. "You will be," she said. It was not a question. He was at the Holt building at 8:15, in the courier company's jacket, with the messenger bag and the USB drive in the inner pocket. He delivered the 4th floor mail first, because that was the route. He was in the elevator at 8:23 when his phone buzzed with a calendar invitation from Patrick Shen. "Security briefing, V. Holt, 8:30. He looked at the invitation. He looked at the courier jacket. He accepted the invitation. The conference room on the 5th floor was the same conference room where Daniel had spent large portions of 9 years. The monitors on the wall were new. The table was the same. Vivienne Holt was at the head of it, 33 years old, with the focused attention of someone who had been awake since 2:47 a.m., and who was now looking at the person who had walked into her conference room in a courier jacket. "Mr. Crane," she said. "Miss Holt," he said. A pause. "You were delivering our mail this morning," she said. "I was," he said. "And last night you stopped an intrusion that my security team couldn't locate." "I helped locate it," he said. "Patrick's team stopped it." "How long have you been couriering this building?" she said. 8 months, he said. "The same number of months as since I left." She was very still. "You've been in this building for 8 months, she said. "In a courier jacket." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He had been thinking about how to answer this question since 2:48 a.m. "Because I built the network in this building," he said, "and I felt responsible for it, and I wanted to be close enough to know if something went wrong." He paused. "Something went wrong." Vivienne said, "Patrick, can you walk me through what Daniel built?" Patrick walked her through it. The East segment design, the OT boundary configuration, the authentication module, the kill sequence. He walked her through it in the language of someone who had just learned it. It took 22 minutes. When Patrick finished, Vivienne was quiet for a moment. "The East segment," she said. "The OT boundary configuration, the authentication module. These are things we've been managing for how long?" "Since before I joined," Patrick said. The East segment build history shows 2016 as the original implementation date. 9 years, Vivienne said. 9 years, Patrick said. She looked at Daniel.
"Your team has been managing a network segment you didn't fully understand," Daniel said. "The core architecture, the East segment, the OT boundary design, the authentication module was built by me and documented by me. The documentation was migrated when you changed project management systems in 2021. The migration didn't include my pre-departure technical specifications because they were in a format the new system didn't import cleanly. My deputy, Marcus Osei, flagged it as a gap when he left, but by that time you'd had 6 months of no incidents, and the gap didn't seem urgent." "Marcus flagged it," Vivienne said. "In his departure documentation," Daniel said, "June 2023. I believe it's in your HR archive." He pulled it on the conference room screen.
Marcus's departure documentation included a note, East Segment Authentication Module and OT Boundary Configuration, original architecture specifications not located in current documentation system. Recommend retrieval from prior technical lead before closing handover. The prior technical lead was listed as Daniel Crane. The recommendation had not been acted on. There's a technical handover gap, Patrick said. Yes, Daniel said. There is. Vivienne looked at the screen. The network that runs this building, the OT boundary configuration, the authentication module that was exploited last night. You designed all of it. I designed the security architecture for the entire company, Daniel said. The East segment was one component of that. And you knew last night, she said. At 2:17. I monitor Holt IP ranges, he said. On my own. Passively. I have a service running on my personal laptop that watches for anomalous traffic patterns on infrastructure I designed. I've been running it for 8 months. She was very still again. You've been monitoring our network, she said. I've been watching traffic signatures, he said. I can't see inside the network. I can see what comes in and out at the edge. It's the same thing I could see from any passive external monitoring position. But you've been watching specifically. Yes, he said. Because I designed the network and I understood the threat model, and because I knew the documentation gap existed, and because I believed it was a matter of time before someone found the East segment vulnerability. You knew the vulnerability existed, she said. I knew the conditions that would produce it, he said. The module is secure in the network architecture I designed. In a network architecture that has changed in the past 3 years, I observed some of those changes from the lobby and the elevator. The module's assumptions about the surrounding environment may no longer hold. So when the network changed, the vulnerability window opened, he said. Yes. How long has the window been open? Daniel thought about this carefully. Based on what I observed in building maintenance access patterns and physical cable changes over the past 6 months, he said, I estimate the window has been open for approximately 4 months. Vivienne looked at Patrick. 4 months, she said. We'd need to verify that independently, Patrick said. But based on the architecture documentation, it's plausible. The person who had facilitated the documentation gap was not Vivienne. Vivienne had become CEO 18 months ago, when her predecessor had stepped back from operations. She had inherited a company, a team, and a technical infrastructure she had begun systematically modernizing. The modernization had been competent. She had brought in Patrick, had upgraded the monitoring systems, had contracted for a third-party penetration testing cycle that had not, for reasons now apparent, included the East segment architecture documentation gap in its scope. The documentation gap had a specific origin. His name was Terrence Walsh. He had been Holt Infrastructure's VP of Technology from 2020 to 2023. He had overseen the 2021 documentation migration. He had been in the position to action Marcus's recommendation. He had not. Patrick found this in the archive records over the following 2 days. The migration records showed that Terrence had personally signed off on the documentation migration as complete in December 2021. One of the 17 documents flagged for manual review had been Daniel's technical specification archive. The action noted was, migrated to current system, confirmed complete. It had not been migrated. The 40-page specification that Daniel had produced between 2016 and 2020 did not exist anywhere in the current documentation system. Terrence had signed off on a migration he had not verified. This was not, as far as Patrick could determine, malicious. There was no evidence that Terrence Walsh had deliberately suppressed Daniel's documentation. There was strong evidence that he had signed off on a migration verification without actually verifying it. The specific institutional laziness of someone who had accepted a status report at face value because verification was tedious and the system appeared to be working. Vivienne read Patrick's archive summary on a Thursday morning. She called Daniel. Terrence Walsh, she said. I know who he is, Daniel said. The migration sign-off. Did you know? Daniel thought about this. I didn't know specifically, he said. I knew the documentation hadn't been migrated because Marcus told me when he left. I assumed it was a systems gap. I didn't know someone had signed off on a migration they hadn't verified. Does it matter? Vivienne said. The question surprised him a little. It was not the question he had expected. Whether knowing changes what we need to do, she said. He thought about this. No, he said. It doesn't change what you need to do. You need the full documentation in your current system. You need a complete security architecture review. And you need someone who understands the threat model I built the architecture around. That's you, she said. I'm the only person with that complete picture, he said. Yes. Terrence is no longer with the company, she said. He left in March of this year. I know, Daniel said. I've been delivering packages to the building for 8 months. I noticed these things. A pause. I want to understand something, Vivian said. 8 months. Delivering our mail. You didn't say anything? You didn't send a letter. You didn't flag the documentation gap through any channel. No, Daniel said. Why not? Because I didn't know how it would be received, he said. I'm the former chief security architect. I was let go in a restructuring. Coming back with claims about documentation gaps and network vulnerabilities from a courier jacket has a specific credibility problem. I couldn't fix the gap without access. I couldn't get access without credibility. And I couldn't establish credibility without something that demonstrated the gap was real. He paused. Last night, was that something? A long silence. That's generous, she said. It's accurate, he said. I try to be accurate. How long has the window been open? Based on what I observed in building maintenance access patterns and physical cable changes over the past 6 months, he said, I estimate the window has been open for approximately 4 months. Vivienne looked at Patrick. 4 months, she said. We'd need to verify that independently, Patrick said. But based on the architecture documentation, it's plausible. The person who had facilitated the documentation gap was not Vivienne. Vivienne had become CEO 18 months ago when her predecessor had stepped back from operations. She had inherited a company, a team, and a technical infrastructure she had begun systematically modernizing. The documentation gap had a specific origin. His name was Terrence Walsh. He had been Holt Infrastructure's VP of Technology from 2020 to 2023. He had overseen the 2021 documentation migration. He had been in the position to action Marcus's recommendation. He had not. Patrick found this in the archive records over the following 2 days at Vivienne's direction. The migration records showed that Terrence had personally signed off on the documentation migration as complete in December 2021. One of the 17 legacy documents flagged for manual review had been Daniel's technical specification archive. The action noted was, migrated to current system, confirmed complete. It had not been migrated. The 40-page specification that Daniel had produced between 2016 and 2020 did not exist anywhere in the current documentation system. Terrence had signed off on a migration he had not verified. This was not, as far as Patrick could determine, malicious. There was no evidence that Terrence Walsh had deliberately suppressed Daniel's documentation. There was strong evidence that he had signed off on a migration verification without actually verifying it, which was the specific organizational failure that had produced the gap, not concealment, but the specific institutional laziness of someone who had accepted a status report at face value because verification was tedious and the system appeared to be working. The system had appeared to be working because it was working. Daniel's architecture was sound. Nothing had failed because nothing had needed to fail, until the surrounding network architecture changed enough to open the vulnerability window, and then the module's undocumented kill sequence was the only thing that could address the threat, and the undocumented kill sequence was on a USB drive in a courier bag. Vivienne read Patrick's archive summary on a Thursday morning. She called Daniel. Terrence Walsh, she said. I know who he is, Daniel said. The migration sign-off. Did you know? Daniel thought about this. I didn't know specifically, he said. I knew the documentation hadn't been migrated because Marcus told me when he left. I assumed it was a systems gap. I didn't know someone had signed off on a migration they hadn't verified. Does it matter? Vivienne said. Whether it was intentional or negligent, whether knowing changes what we need to do, she said. He thought about this. No, he said. It doesn't change what you need to do. The meeting Vivienne called was on a Friday, 1 week after the incident. He came in his own clothes, a plain dark shirt, good trousers, the kind of professional casual that said nothing except that the person wearing it had things to say. He brought the USB drive and his laptop. He also brought a 40-page printed copy of the documentation because physical documents were harder to lose in a system migration. Vivienne opened the meeting. I want to start by saying something directly, she said. The restructuring in March was a decision I made with incomplete information. The incompleteness was not fully visible to me at the time. But I want you to know that I understand the gap between what I thought I was doing and what I was actually doing. What I want to do now, she said, is fix the gap. In two ways. First, the technical gap. The full documentation archive needs to be in our current system. Second, the structural gap. The chief security architect position needs to be held by someone with the complete architectural picture. Right now, that person is you, whether you're on our payroll or not. I want you back. Not in the same role. The role needs to be redefined. But I want you leading security architecture with the title, the compensation, and the team to do it correctly. Daniel was quiet for a moment. The documentation first, he said. I want everything transferred to your current system, verified by Patrick's team, and signed off by me, not by Terrence's method, actually verified. He walked them through the East segment redesign, the OT boundary reconfiguration, the authentication module update, and the 3 dependencies that needed to be updated before the main change could go in. It took 41 minutes. When he finished, Vivian said, "Can you start Monday?" He thought about Neve. He thought about the school that was 6 blocks from the apartment, and the morning walk on Michigan Avenue, and what Neve had said, "You will be," and the precision of her certainty. I need to sort the courier contract, he said. I'll give them notice today. I can start Monday. Keep running it, she said. The passive monitoring, until you're inside and have full visibility. I'd rather have eyes on the edge from someone who knows what they're looking at. He looked at the USB drive on the table. All right, he said. And Daniel, she said. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. For last night, and for the 8 months. He thought about the courier jacket. He thought about the 4th floor mail route and the elevator, and the 8 months of watching from outside what he had built from inside. He thought about Neve asking what connects to it, and her notebook of systems, and the half-second of preparation before each question. The network needed someone watching it, he said. I was the person who understood what to watch for. The conversation with Vivienne about what the restructuring had actually dismantled happened on a Tuesday the following week, in her office. She had asked for the conversation. Not for any practical reason. The practical matters had been settled on Friday. She had asked because she wanted to understand something that the Friday meeting had addressed procedurally, but not humanly. I want to understand your decision-making, she said. March through November. What you chose and why, he told her. He told her about the contractor offer, the reduced rate, the per-project structure, the absence of the institutional access that his work required. You needed stability, she said. I needed a school schedule that worked, he said. The contractor offer didn't provide that, and the courier position did. The courier position was a Corktown-based route that included this building, he said. It was specific. I chose it specifically. She looked at him. Because of the building, she said. Because of the network, he said. The network I built is managing operational infrastructure for 340,000 people. That's water treatment, electrical distribution, emergency dispatch. When I left, the documentation went with me, not deliberately, but because the migration hadn't been verified. I knew that. I couldn't fix it from outside without an incident that demonstrated the gap. You were waiting for an incident, she said. I was monitoring for one, he said, hoping it wouldn't come, knowing it eventually would. The utility clients, she said. The 340,000 people. Yes, he said. That was what drove the 8 months, she said. Not the company. Not the restructuring. He thought about this honestly. The company built the relationships, he said. I built the network that makes those relationships work. The clients trusted the company, and the company used my architecture to earn that trust. The responsibility doesn't separate cleanly. But at 2:17 in the morning, you picked up the phone. Yes, he said. Because of the 340,000 people, and because Marcus called, and because I'd been watching for 8 months, and I was tired of watching. The restructuring, she said. Gerald's decision, with my endorsement. We didn't know what we were cutting. No, he said. If we had known, you would have made different choices, he said. Probably. Yes, she said. A silence. I need you to know that the architecture I built is sound, he said. The vulnerability that was exploited last Tuesday was a function of the surrounding network changing without reference to the original design. The design itself is correct. I want you to know that, so that when Patrick and I do the architecture review, you understand what we're working to restore, not just what we're working to fix. She looked at him. I want to understand it, she said. The architecture. I've been CEO for 18 months, and I've been managing a technical infrastructure I didn't have the complete picture of. I want the complete picture. That will take time, he said. I have time, she said. I'm starting Monday. He almost smiled. So am I, he said. The conversation with Vivienne about what the restructuring had actually dismantled happened on a Tuesday the following week in her office. I want to understand your decision-making, she said. March through November. What you chose and why, he told her. He told her about the contractor offer, the reduced rate, the per-project structure, the absence of the institutional access that his work required. He told her about the decision to decline and the calculation behind it, Neve's school, the mortgage structure, the specific conclusion that the contractor offer was not viable as a primary income source. You needed stability, she said. I needed a school schedule that worked, he said. The contractor offer didn't provide that, and the courier position did. The courier position was a Corktown-based route that included this building, he said. It was specific. I chose it specifically. Because of the network, he said. The network I built is managing operational infrastructure for 340,000 people. That's water treatment, electrical distribution, emergency dispatch. When I left, the documentation went with me, not deliberately, but because the migration hadn't been verified. I knew that. I couldn't fix it from